Okay, I think I'm ready. Good morning. Yeah, we really had a good session last week after church with the Bible study, and I'm so thankful for each one of you who made the time and the effort to stay back and listen to me talk for even longer than 40 minutes. So I'm thankful for this church. They know how I like to speak up here, so they decided to give me more time after. No, but we really hope that apart from the preaching, that we can go deeper together as a community into God's Word. And we want to know God, right? Because we want to know who we serve. How do we serve Him? Who is He? What is He like? We want to have a relationship with Him. And it is out of that relationship that we will then know our true identity and how we should live here on earth as it is heaven. Our purpose here, our life here, our calling here, it all comes out from that relationship with God. And so let me just read the reading this morning, and then we can go into the sermon for today. Okay, so the reading today would be from the book of Exodus, chapter 2, verse 23, to chapter 3, verse 14. It says, "During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning, and God remembered His covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew." Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, "I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned." When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, "Moses, Moses." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Do not come near. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground." And he said, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, and he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." But Moses said to God, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the children of Israel out of Egypt?" He said, "But I will be with you, and this shall be the sign for you that I have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." Then Moses said to God, "If I come to the people of Israel and say to them, 'The God of your fathers have sent me to you,' and they ask me, 'What is his name?' what shall I say to them?" God said to Moses, "I am who I am." And he said, "Say this to the people of Israel, 'I am has sent me to you.' I am has sent me to you." So we're going through, this is going to be a 2 to 3 year series on the king and his kingdom. And we're going to go through all the books of the Bible. We've just finished the series on Genesis, and today is the start on the book of Exodus. This is the second book in the, we call it the Pentateuch, or the five books of Moses, or the Torah in the Old Testament. But this is such an amazing book. I had the privilege of teaching this book in Cairo, Egypt. This is all where it's taking place, and to be in that location to teach this book is really amazing. And it really impacted me, this book, because it really talks about who God is and how the people of God got to know who their God is. Who is this God that came to rescue them? And how did they relate to Him? How did they come to know who He is? This is the book that actually tells us all these stories, right? And the word Exodus really just means departure or get out or leaving, okay? So they are leaving the slavery in Egypt out to a good land that God will bring them. And so today's session is really from chapter 1 to chapter 6. Obviously, we can't cover all that. The focus is on the burning bush narrative, which is in chapter 3 to chapter 4, verse 17, okay? So when we come to it, we're going to slow down a little bit, and then we'll wrap up today. Okay, so just because this is the first session, so just to let you know, we believe that this is a book written by Moses. This is him in 1400 years before Jesus. This is a long time before Jesus, okay? And he's writing this book down. And the question is, why did Moses, or why did God told Moses to write these stories down? Who is it for? And we realize that actually Moses is writing this book to the Israelites who have just left Egypt, sorry, but have not yet entered into the promised land, okay? So, so right now, they are in the wilderness, 40 years in the wilderness. So you can imagine, right, Moses is very busy. He's talking to Pharaoh. Pharaoh is always resisting, and then he needs to lead the people out quickly. He needs to go to the Red Sea. All this, he does not have time to write the book. So now he comes to the wilderness, and he had 40 years before he enters the land. What does he do? He writes a book. Why does he write this book for the Israelites in the wilderness? Well, so that they can remember the stories of God and who God is when they enter into the land. Because the generation that enter into the land are a new generation. And the idea is that those who then settle in the new land, the next generations and future generations will continue to remember who God is through the writing of this book. All right, so this is part of why it's written. And when they are traveling in the wilderness, the Israelites, they might have some of the questions they need answers to. So some of these questions, for example, would be, who is this God of our fathers, right? How did we end up as slaves, as people in the first place? And why did God bring us to the wilderness? He just take us to the land, but why did He bring us through this wilderness? And these books are designed to answer some of these questions, right? As we will see in this session. Okay, so when you read, so how many of you have read chapter 1 to chapter 6 of Exodus? Some of you, not many of you. But when you read chapter 1 of Exodus, you'll quickly realize that they are making the connection from Genesis. What it means is you need to know what Genesis have just said coming into the story of Exodus, okay? So I'll just quickly recap the final part going into Exodus. So at the end of the book of Genesis, the story ends with the family of Jacob in Egypt, right? There's a famine. They go to Egypt. They buy whatever food they need to survive. And their brother Joseph, right, is just there, who's like the second in command in Egypt. And this is where, coming to the end of the story, Jacob dies in Egypt, but he instructs his children to bury him not in Egypt, but in Canaan, okay? So they go to Canaan, they have this funeral session in Canaan, then they come back to Egypt. And what they tell us is that this family is about 70 people all together. It's a big family, okay? Big family, but not quite the nation that God had described that they would be. So Joseph will then take care of the family in Egypt for generations to come, okay? Now, very easy When we finish reading chapter 50 in Genesis, we flip over, Exodus starts. But what we need to keep in mind is when we flip over the page, there's actually a 400-year gap between Genesis and Exodus. And we are not told so much about what happens in this 400 years, except some important details for the story in Exodus. And within this 400 years, the family of Jacob of 70 people grew to the size of a nation. Like, it's a huge, huge size, okay? Huge size, right? And when Exodus starts, it picks up the story where Israel in Egypt is a huge group of people in Egypt, living in Egypt, and Pharaoh is very concerned about this migrant population. Migrant population. Just think about this. How relevant is this book, right? How would they know? So Pharaoh's very, very concerned about the migrant population, right? And it starts with Moses comes in 400 years after the patriarchs, right? Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So we come into Exodus chapter 1. It tells us that the generation of Joseph passed away, obviously 400 years. Israel becomes the size of a nation. Like I said, Pharaoh is getting a bit antsy, right? Because he doesn't know, will this migrant population suddenly rebel against them? And if they do, with the size that they are, if he doesn't do anything about them, what do you think would happen, right? And it's really interesting that this story really kind of relate to our current situation in Australia, in our modern society, that we have similar concerns about migrant population. So anyway, what Pharaoh decides to do in order to control this population is his brilliant idea of enslaving them. Yeah, that's the way not to rebel, right? So he decides to enslave the Hebrew people in the land, right? And it's basically hard work. You're building, you're making them into construction workers. You don't give them rest, all that kind of horrible stuff that goes on as you are a slave. But the story goes on is that as Pharaoh oppressed them more, the people of God, the Hebrew people, became even more fruitful. Okay, so this is the Bible's way of saying that they had even more kids. The more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied. The more they were oppressed, the more they were blessed. It's an interesting, ironic situation. And so Pharaoh is pulling out his hair. He's thinking, okay, I've made them slaves. That didn't really work. And so he finally goes into the most drastic, evil plan of killing Hebrew baby boys. And the instruction is to Hebrew midwives: you see a boy come out of the womb, you kill it. You see a girl come out of the womb, you let them live. Okay? Now here's the choice facing the Hebrew midwives. What would they choose to do? And every one of us living in any society, whether it's in this country or any country, we will always face a bit of this question. What would we choose to do in the face of this unfair situation that's coming to us, right? The midwives decided that they are going to fear God more than they fear Pharaoh. And this is such an amazing word, because then it suddenly contrasts Pharaoh and the midwives. Pharaoh, who is opposing God and against God, and the midwives who are on God's side. And they are going to choose to be faithful and loyal to God rather than to Pharaoh, who has the power over the whole nation, right? And basically, the midwives, they didn't listen to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh doesn't know what to do because they keep multiplying, keep being fruitful, and finally he orders another decree to all the people of the land and says, you see a Hebrew boy, you throw him into the Nile. Okay? You have to understand Nile. Okay? The Nile, Pharaoh has just decreed that every Hebrew boy should be thrown into the Nile. Every newborn should be thrown into the Nile. It's interesting because Nile, for Egypt, this is where the whole economy of Egypt depends. Why is it in ancient times that Egypt is often the most powerful nation on earth? It's because of this Nile. Because of the Nile, they are able to grow crops. They're able to feed their own people. Uh, they're not so much dependent on whether there's rain or not. Of course, those things helps. But the Nile is said to be their lifeblood of the nation. Okay, and here it is, the lifeblood, the element that's supposed to give the nation life. Pharaoh turns it into a weapon against Hebrew kids. And it's important to emphasize, this is not God who's killing people. This is an unprovoked situation by Pharaoh who decides to kill Hebrew boys in the Nile. Okay? So keep that in mind, because I think this has relation to the first plague that the Egyptians will see, which is the water turning to blood. Okay? Just think about this. So the story goes on to chapter 2. We get Moses' birth, okay? And why does it tell us all this situation with the Egyptians and the Hebrew people? Because this is the situation in which Moses is born into. And the parents had to decide, how long can I hide this child? How long can I protect this child? It's a boy. What can I do? Okay? So the story tells us that they were with the child for 3 months, and they decided, okay, it's time. We need to let go. Because who knows what will happen to us if we are found having kept a Hebrew boy. And so the mother put the 3-month-old into a basket to float it on the Nile, right? Don't know what will happen, God's will. I mean, if you think about it, those who are parents, I have a 3-year-old. You know, child safety, my wife has to be with Ezekiel in Sunday school. Can you imagine a 3-month-old in a basket on the river? What are the chances of it surviving? And if you've been to Egypt at all, there are some parts of the Nile, it's so wide. This is just impossible. But it says that his sister was watching from afar to see what would happen. And the idea would be, if the baby perishes in the basket, then I guess the sister will go back and tell the parents what has happened, right? It will be a sad, tragic situation. But lo and behold, as the basket flows down the river, guess who is at the river taking a bath? Of all the people in Egypt, it had to be Pharaoh's daughter, right? And it's interesting because Pharaoh decreed that all the Hebrew baby boys had to die in the Nile, but somehow, Pharaoh's daughter has some kind of power or authority to be able to then keep the Hebrew child from the Nile. Like, she recognizes that this child in the basket is a Hebrew boy, one of the Hebrew boys, one of the many who perished. And she decides that she's going to adopt this kid. And in an ironic way, right, this Moses' sisters, looking at this situation, goes up to Pharaoh's daughter and say, hey, would you like me to ask someone to come and take care of this kid? Yeah, okay, I know the perfect person who will take care of this kid. Yeah, the child's mother. Of course, she doesn't say it's the child's mother. And not only does Moses get to be taken care by his family, right, the Pharaoh's daughter also paid the family to take care of their own child. This is the best situation that you can hope for. This is the idea. Remember, God made the covenant with Abraham. I will bless those who bless you, and I'll curse those who curse you. Right? And God also says that the blessing will come through this family. I will be your God. Right? And this is exactly how it's being played out in the story of Moses. And it's interesting to also note that Moses is named by Pharaoh's daughter. The name Moses we get is from Pharaoh's daughter. And she says that I name him Moses because I drew him out of the water. And this would in some ways define the life of Moses, whom God would use to draw his people out of the slavery in Egypt. Okay? So it's a bit of a foretelling in what's going to happen in the story. Now, years later, Moses grows up, okay? We know that he grows up in the family, and then at a certain point, Pharaoh's daughter will take him in, and he actually grows up in Pharaoh's palace of all places. He's supposed to be dead, but then he's now alive in Pharaoh's palace of all places. So what that means is that he's educated And he's trained in all of the Egyptian ways, the Egyptian language, the culture, the religion. In fact, there is also some sources that claim that Moses actually was one of the military commander, if you can believe, from Pharaoh's fear of them rebelling to them making Moses one of his military commanders. So he's highly trained, highly qualified. Okay? And at this time, for some reason, and it's not told to us in Exodus, but in Acts, there is a speech by Stephen who gives us a hint about how to interpret this story. And Stephen tells us that for some reason at this stage, Moses in his heart knew that God was going to use him to save his people. So he sees this situation where the Egyptian is oppressing the brother. He's one of his, well, not the real brother, but a Hebrew person. And then Moses goes in and intervenes and actually kills the Egyptian. Then he hides it, okay? And then the next day, he sees two Hebrew guys arguing against each other, and he intervenes to be the peacemaker, or so he thought he would be the peacemaker. And lo and behold, these guys turned around and said, "Who made you ruler and judge over us?" Implying that the people actually don't really fully accept Moses and his authority. Right? Who made you to do that? Do you have the authority from God? Like, what is it to you? And when Moses heard it, he realized that, okay, then people must know that I have killed an Egyptian. And sure enough, when Pharaoh heard it, he was going after Moses, and Moses had to flee to the land of Midian. And this is a wilderness place, okay? This is out in the bush. You're no longer in big city Cairo in Egypt, or I don't know if it's Cairo at that time, but it's Egypt. And then he goes, right, from the center of the world to the bush, the outback, the wilderness, right? Harsh life. But that's where he met his wife, so don't be too hard. That's where he have his kid. And his kid's name is Gershom. And he says that he names this kid Gershom because I have been a foreigner in a foreign land. So Moses recognizes his situation of going into the wilderness is an exile. He's not home. He's not home. But he's hoping maybe one day he will be able to return home, but he is not home, okay? And it's in this situation we come to read a really amazing paragraph of God's heart. Really, really amazing. It's the text that we just read. So I'll just read it again. Right? During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery, and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. God heard their groaning, right? And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. What did he knew? He knew their suffering. He knew their affliction. This is who our God is. He hears our cry. He remembers us. He has not abandoned us in our own broken world. He sees us. He knows us. All right, if you just close your eyes and you imagine, we have all sorts of ages here in this church, and with all the different ages, we all experience different losses at different points of our life. I mean, if you think about a 3-year-old, losing your Hot Wheel cars, that's a sad thing for them. Right? If you're a teenager, maybe you've broken up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend. Right? If you're a parent, maybe you've gone through a miscarriage or loss or being widowed. When you're an adult, the loss of a parent at an early age. I mean, if you think about the times in the COVID time, a lot of us remember the lockdown, but we also remember the people that they have lost in that time, early than normal. How many children became fatherless because of that situation? And then imagine reading this, right? That says that God sees, God hears, God knows your heart, right? When you serve in the church so faithfully, but people slander you anyway, there's gossip going on. When people don't recognize the things that you do, God sees you. God knows you. This is a very intimate and relational God that we have. Maybe some of us even experience, I don't know, rejection from parents because we follow Jesus. God sees you and God knows. So we come in the midst of the wilderness. Moses, from this maybe a high-ranking official in the palace, who knows, right? This is a bit of the imagination, but he is in part of Pharaoh's family. And he may be a military commander. Now he's a shepherd, a lowly shepherd. In the wilderness, nobody knows and nobody cares. And it's in this precise moment and in this situation, God meets him where he's at, in the form of a burning bush. And it's interesting to note that the picture given to us about God is a fire and a bush. And you know, we as Victorians, we know all about bushfires. When you have a bushfire, you run, right? When you have a bushfire, the idea is it consumes. But when Moses saw the fire on this bush that does not consume the bush, that's very strange. And so he goes and he looks, and God responds to him. There is something about God's presence that attracts us to him. And when we respond in coming to him, you know what God would say to us? He doesn't condemn us. He's not an angry God that condemns. You know what he says? He calls you by name. He said, Moses, Moses. Right? And this is amazing. He will say to Moses what he is going to do. And he will say to Moses, and also I have chosen you to be part of this plan. I have come down to deliver my people, and I have chosen you, and I will send you to deliver my people out of Egypt into the land that is good. Right? Of course, you would think, a lot of you who love Jesus, who love God, you would say, God, just tell me what to do. What is my calling? What is my vision? Should I go to Brazil and speak to the people in the Amazon? Like, tell me what to do. Right? If you only tell me, then I would just go do it. Okay. Now, you think that would be Moses' experience, but that's not. And the story tells us he rejected God 5 times. 5 times. Last week in the Bible study, I said that if my son is not listening to me 3 times, I'm going to take action, right? But God gives him 5 times. And Moses' resistance are these 5 things, 5 issues, very relatable to us in our own insecurity. He says, who am I? This is a question about identity. Who am I that I can go to Pharaoh? Who do you think? I'm a shepherd right now. How can I go to Pharaoh and say these things? Why would he listen to me? That's the question, right? And if I go to my people, what should I say to them about who you are? What's your name? Okay? And even if I tell them, they will not believe me, or this is really going down the hill, right? They will not believe me, even if I tell them. Even if I tell them, I'm not eloquent. I can't speak well. I'm not good with words, right? This is talking about your own qualification. Finally, he says, God, just please send someone else, right? And how does God respond? Here is how God responds. In the question of identity, who am I? God says, I am with you. That is our identity. Our God is with us, okay? And we are with him. He is our God. We are his people. Right? When it comes to saying, who is this God? How can we tell people? What is his name? If only we can tell this name, then we can tell who he is. Okay, so let me just a bit unpack this situation here, and I'll come back to it quickly. So when Moses asked this question, what is your name? It's important because in ancient time, name defines the person that you are. Okay? Especially who names you, also very important. That means if someone names you, they have often the authority over you, and the meaning of the name kind of defines who you are a little bit. This is also the case if you know the story of Daniel and his friends. They changed their names when they went to Babylon, right? Now, why is it that Moses wants to know God's name? It's because in ancient time, when you talk about God, they do not believe that there's only one God like we do right now as Christians, okay? They believe there are many gods. And each god has a name and a function. So, for example, one god is in charge of the rain. So you pray to the rain god, you sacrifice to the rain god so that you have rain for your crops. Oh, you want to have a child, you go to the fertility god. You want to have more money. Happy Chinese New Year, right? You pray to the money god to have more money. So every god has its own function and characteristics. So Moses is asking, well, who are you? What's your name? What can I tell people? And God says this, I am who I am. This is not the name of God, okay? The name of God that we know is Yahweh, the Lord. Why does God respond, I am who I am? The other way to translate it is, I will be who I will be, okay? The English, the Hebrew word Yeh, we translate is I am, okay? And I am and Yahweh, they share the same Hebrew root word of to be. In other words, I will be who I will be. He will be who he will be. You do not get to put God in a box. You do not get to define who he is. In fact, he doesn't really owe you an explanation. He will do what he wants. He will be who he will be. It speaks to God's sovereignty and eternal aspect. And the story is, he tells Moses to go to the people and say, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. In other words, the way that I have been worshipped before by your fathers will be how I will be worshipped right now, and will also be how I will be worshipped in the future. I will not change. My character is unchanging. My nature is unchanging. I am who I am. You do not get to define me. So it's a bit of a, not really answering the question, but kind of explaining who he is. Okay? And so, let me go quickly. So, they will not believe me. Well, Moses, I'm going to give you the power to perform miracles. So when you perform those miracles, your people, the people of Israel, will believe you. Oh, I'm not eloquent. I can't speak really well. I haven't been to this. Okay, you know what? Moses, just hear me. Who made your mouth? Who made your mouth? Isn't it me? I made your mouth, right? And I find it really humorous that God would say, it's not, I will be with you, I will be with your mouth. Like, this is, I mean, you know, God's kind of sense of humor. I will be with your mouth and teach you what to say, so don't worry, right? If you're not eloquent, it's okay. I will teach you what to say. And then when he say, please send someone else, this is where God got angry. And it says that the anger of the Lord is kindled. But it's interesting that even though God got angry, his response to Moses is not spiteful. It's not, hey, you know, I tell you to go, so you should go. You know what he does? You know what God does? He brought Moses' brother to be Moses' speaker. And he tells Moses, you will be like God to Aaron. I mean, if God's giving you all of this, you still don't want to go? Like, how much more does God need to assure you that he is with you? You will be like God. Man, I mean, can you imagine if people say that to me? I will be like God to my brothers. Right? No, like, this is the most affirming thing you can ever get out of God. Like, why won't you go? And so he goes. He does go, but reluctantly. He's still not sure. He still has a struggle with God. Right? And so they do go, Aaron and Moses, and they go and tell the people exactly what God told them to tell the people. They perform the miracles exactly the way that God asked them to perform. And you know what? Lo and behold, they didn't doubt. They believed. And then they say that the Lord had visited the people of Israel and seen their affliction, and they bowed down and worshiped. So not only did they believe, the response of the people from the words of Aaron through Moses from God is that they bowed down and worship not Moses, not Aaron, but God. This is the correct response. This is what we expect of the people, of how they respond to God's word, right? But this is in contrast to the next section where he goes to Pharaoh and he says to Pharaoh, "Let my people go so that they can come and worship me in the wilderness." You know what Pharaoh says? "Who is the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord. Moreover, I will not let Israel go." In fact, he made it even worse. And the people complain, "Moses, did you come and kill us? Like, what's going on? You're supposed to come and deliver us, right?" And then Moses goes to God and say, "Hey, you told me you're going to deliver them, but you have not. In fact, you have made it worse." And God says to them, "That's how you're going to know I am the Lord." In this difficult situation, in this impossible situation, you will see with great mighty acts, I'm going to deliver my people. So what was Moses' issue? Why was God angry? Moses' issue was that he didn't trust God. I mean, all the back and forth, God could have gotten impatient with him, but it was at that moment of the issue of trust. Moses trusted more in his inability than God's ability to do these things through him. That was the main issue. That was the main issue. Why did God bring us to the wilderness? This is the original audience question. And the text actually tells us, not all in one place, that it is to worship him, that it is for fulfilling the covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, so that they can become his people and they can become his God, so that to be his people in his promised kingdom. And actually, not only for the Hebrew people, but also for the Egyptians, that they would know that I am the Lord. I am Yahweh, right? Yahweh. I am Yahweh. Who is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? I mean, when you look at the back and forth between Moses and God, how patient is he? How patient is God with us? When we are so insecure about ourselves that we are looking at ourselves rather than looking to God, how patient is he waiting for us to rise up in our faith and put our trust in him, right? This is the God who sees, who hears, who remembers and knows us. The God who is merciful and patient. The God who is compassionate, slow to anger. But he's also the God who will confront evil. He confronts Pharaoh. He's the God who comes to us. Do you know the God who came to save you? Do you have a relationship, a close relationship, where you can go back and forth like Moses and God? Because that is part of the process. It's messy. We don't like it. We want an immediate turn. But that is part of the process of how we can come to know God. Right? I am who I am. Right? God says to Moses, I am has sent me to you. Tell the people I am has sent me to you. And Jesus, interestingly enough, he is also the I am and the one who's also being sent. And in John's gospel, he tells his disciples, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the true vine. So come to me, because he knows you by name. Do you know the God who came to save you? Will you be willing to take the time, the effort to know the God who came to save you, so that you know how to give thanks to him, to worship him as he deserves, as he is worthy? Let me pray. God, I just want to thank you, Lord, that you have made such an amazing way for us, not just to worship you from afar, but to be able to come close to you. That people in ancient times, that Moses was the one who saw you at the burning bush, that we now, because of what Jesus has done, that we can come so close to you, each one of us, not just the elders, the pastors, the overseers, or the deacons, not just the reverends, but each individual one of us can come to you personally, sharing with you our afflictions and our desires, because you know us. because you see us, because you hear our broken heart. Give us the power and the strength to come to you, Lord. However far we have gone away, or ashamed that we feel, or think that we are so far gone, help us to come back to you in your presence, to come to a God who knows us and understands what we're going through, that we might find grace and mercy in our time of need. In Jesus' name, amen.